I was introduced to Stellar Blade when it was first announced during one of those Sony Directs. Upon watching the trailer, I was sold on the visuals and music, but mostly shook by the Korean dialogue. On April 26th, I drove to my local Target on a whim and picked up the last day one copy in stock, per the red shirts. Shortly after starting the game, I equipped the day one glasses and earring, and the combination remained unchanged for the rest of my playthrough. While the story was not the strong point of the game for me, I was still attentive enough, for the most part, to follow along with what was happening. I thought that it was funny that despite all the memories and pieces of information Eve collected throughout her journey, she was still in somewhat of disbelief when she learned that Mother Sphere was not really the good entity in the story. It felt as if me, the player, was the only one reading all the memory discs and informational pieces. My favorite character in the entire game was Taki, and that was the case ever since the moment she freed Eve from her pod in the beginning of the game. Taki was the 7th Airborne Squad commander and Eve's superior. I liked her character so much because of her stoic and headstrong attitude, and her very distinct character design. Taki's fate in the beginning of the game was enough to break me, and even more so when she makes her return later on as the true one-winged angel. My favorite side quest of the game was the one where you get Enya some damn legs and learn about her past. The detail that fascinated me the most was learning that the song that she sings in the bar was slightly varied from what it originally was a long, long time ago. It really shows just how far in the future this game takes place and makes me think about what life was like in this game's world prior to all the Naytiba madness. A wave of anxiety definitely hit me when I reached the game's final choice, which came as a surprise because the game was linear up to that point. Being able to choose only one of the two options flashed me back to 2015 playing Life is Strange for the first time, and fully weighing out the consequences of both choices in my head, but in the end, I was actually happy with the ending that I received. I had a great time with the game's combat mechanics and spent a lot of my world exploration seeking out enemies to fight, while keeping in mind which combinations of enemies not to fuck with depending on if they were walking to an area with more enemies so as to completely overwhelm me if I decided to take them on. There were times when I could block and parry flawlessly, and other times where my brain betrayed me and I would click the complete opposite button that is being prompted on the screen. It was super satisfying when my blocks and parries were executed consistently and flawlessly, prompting a retribution strike. Utilizing burst attacks was fun and came in clutch at times throughout the game. They were useful in dicey situations and looked flashy as hell. The square button burst was my go-to for single enemies, and the X button burst was my go-to when there were multiple enemies on the screen. The flying squid Naytiba was my least favorite enemy in the entire game, and I actively tried to avoid them whenever I could, which turned out to be impossible in certain parts of the final levels of the game. Fishing in the game was cool because I liked seeing all the new sea creatures I could catch, but it was more stressful gameplay-wise compared to other games' fishing minigames. I enjoyed tackling all the side quests one by one in between main missions and only had 2 unfinished ones when I completed the game. These included the prayer and one of the fish side quests. At some random point of the game, Stellar Blade became a survival horror and I was all for it. It sort of came out of nowhere, but I embraced it and really ended up having a lot of fun with it. Collecting cans was cool because I liked looking at all the different can designs, even though I only collected about 21 cans. Despite gaining a lot of different outfits, I stuck with the second planet diving suit for pretty much the entire game. My favorite enemies to fight, but mostly look at, were pretty much every type of droid enemy. They looked absolutely menacing, and I loved watching their battle animations. I enjoyed getting wrecked in boss battles because it made defeating them even more satisfying. Taki and the unidentified Naytiba boss fights were my absolute favorites, even if Taki's low-key broke my heart. A lot of things about this game could be described as beautiful, such as the level areas, the characters, the music, etc. 807 was my favorite level aesthetically speaking. Seeing the modern day looking ruins in the rainfall surrounded by large bodies of raging ocean brought a wave of adventure. It was a bit strange to me that there were 2 different desert levels, and I didn't expect the Great Desert to be smaller than the Wastelands. Being developed by Korean game devs, they stayed true to their country's high beauty standard because I felt like I was playing through a Korean Final Fantasy. A lot of the NPCs and important characters also had a cyberpunk style, rocking mechanical components that looked really cool. While I did appreciate the music in Stellar Blade, it hit different and better when I listened to the soundtrack outside of the game on my own time. Not having to worry about accurate combat reactions, I was able to have a more detailed listen to the soundtrack and sort of rediscovered how upbeat yet emotional a lot of the music sounded, from the ambush theme to Taki's battle theme. Shift Up delivered, as Stellar Blade provided me with an all-around good experience with a big emphasis on the combat. It's not my favorite game I've played this year, but it's definitely one of the more memorable ones. I've had a great time discussing the game in detail with one of my friends in person who's actually played it, and a part of me will continue to dream about a game where we can play as Taki pre-Stellar Blade.
Oh, don't tell me that's the fucking girl from the very beginning that I really liked, and then she fucking died.